Welcome to For the Love of the Game podcast with your hosts, Jefferson Belfort and Brian Hernandez. Brian, how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty well. We had to sadly miss last week's episode. I'm recovering from a back injury. I was working out, tweaked a little muscle in my back, just recovering, feeling a lot better. Excited to get into a lot of basketball. I'm excited. We mentioned a little bit Jeff offline of not going to be today, but I'm really diving deep into the draft, and I'm really the draft prospects, and I'm really excited in the future episodes. So listeners, that's something to look forward to. But today, talking about more final stuff. Jeff, how are you feeling?
I'm pretty good. It's a very cloudy day over here, but I can't complain, honestly. It's been good watching the beginning of the series of the NBA Finals. Um, Definitely been a very interesting playoffs that we've seen, and let's hope that this is an interesting series as well. Um, so I'll just go through the topics that we're going to hit today. We're going to do a finals recap and predictions of what's going to happen throughout the finals. Then we'll unveil that all team selections, some of our surprises and our snubs on that list. Then we'll do a little deep dive into Jimmy Butler and his statement series in the Eastern Conference Finals. And then lastly, we'll round it up. We'll end it up. We'll end it up. We'll finish it up with the weekly roundup. Are you ready, Brian?
Yeah, man, let's get into it.
All right, perfect. So, like I mentioned, the finals already has been something that's been talked about the last couple of days. Definitely has been an interesting game one. A lot of swings in that first game. A lot of interesting things to see. You got to talk about the marvelous quarter that Steph Curry had in the first quarter, scoring 21 in that first. I think he was 6 of 8, 4 or 5 from three, so he came with the thought of making a statement. But early on, I would say the something on the Celtics side of it that made me a little bit more confident for them was Steph Curry was going ballistic in the first quarter, and they were only down by 4, which was
Mm-hmm.
very, very interesting. You saw in the second half, Celtics started to. There was points where the Warriors pulled away, and then the Celtics just, came back to being the team who they were, recalibrated. Obviously, the likes of having a great quote coach like Ime Udoka. Um, Brought back the guys to at bay, and they ended the quarter with a 2 point lead. And then we head into the third quarter, and this is where the game started to splinter. The Warriors just were going crazy. And it looked like typical Warriors fashion. They were going to pull away. This was game one, was going to be a Warriors win. And we would start writing all our ballots for who's going to be the MVP, being Steph Curry for the finals, right? Then, for some reason, the Boston Celtics said, you know what, hold on a second. And they started to right the ship at the end of the third quarter. But it isn't the third quarter that became the biggest story. It was that fourth quarter where and I'm going to take away 3 points from this because it was a Bielitsa three with less than a minute that made the score this, but the Celtics ended the game on a 40-13 run in the fourth quarter. I was not expecting that. I don't think
Yeah.
anybody that was watching that game was expecting to see that, but it truly just was to show that the Celtics were meant to be here. There's a reason why they made it all the way this far to the finals, and I'm sure that this is the wake up call that the Warriors needed to realize that the Celtics are meant to be here as well.
Yeah, it's definitely looking at it at times during the game, it felt to me like the Warriors are kind of like, yeah, we're the Warriors. We know we're the ish, and like they have like that kind of confidence. But to me, it's like the Celtics are super hungry. They also know they deserve to be there, and it's not like a nonchalant, flashy kind of thing, but like that team's firing on all cylinders. We saw it. We saw it. It's I guess one of the most surprising things probably is we all know the best player on the Celtics is Jason Tatum. Jason Tatum went 3 for 17. This was not a Jason Tatum game, and yet we still saw at the end of the game. I mean, at that fourth quarter, like you mentioned, that run. You've been having Al Horford just being Mister Consistent and just dominating. It's kind of crazy. Of you think about how they actually got Al Horford, where it was kind of like a throw in with the Kemba Walker kind of trade and all that kind of stuff. Like it really wasn't anything crazy. Derek White, man, he's scoring wise, he hasn't really been impressive, but he's just kind of been like he's been kind of a game changer since he's got traded to that team for them. Man, it is really surprising and nice to see like the Celtics do this well right now and be able to steal a home game from the Warriors. I want to ask you before I even answer. Are you if you're the Warriors in this scenario, are you worried yet? Are you thinking twice about like this is the Celtics and maybe this is not a cakewalk?
I think, and that is leading to what my next question was going to be, or next thing I was going to say is as well too is, yeah, no, you had to take them a little bit more serious now. Warriors have always been one of those teams where you see them as, um, they play with their food, so to speak,
Yeah.
is that they're like, oh, we could be down by 20, or we're still in this game. We could be
Yeah.
down by 25, we're still in this game. It's no problem. We'll win this game. And that's always been how we've seen the Warriors. But that's where it beckons to the question I wanted to ask. And I got this question from seeing another video that was not on topic of basketball, but it made me think of the Warriors was the perception over the reality of things. And perception wise, because of what the Warriors have done in the past, we're always going to believe that they're still that same Warriors team.
Yeah.
So anytime you see them down by 20, anytime you see them struggling, you believe they're going to get out of it. I'm going to even say in 2019, when KD went down, that was still the same perception that we had. A lot of people did not, even in that moment, believe that the Raptors could beat
Yeah.
Warriors, even with KD down and then eventually Clay going down. But Clay didn't go down until game 6, which means that Clay was there pretty much the whole series because they lost in game 6, right? So that's where I'm beckoning to reality of it. The reality of it now is that this Warriors team is just not the same Warriors team it was during that era of what they were, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes, yes, sometimes they are going to come back from down 20, you know? But to believe that every game they're going to be able to play around with their food and win in the manner that they used to do in the past is just a thing of the past. I don't think it's really a personnel thing. I think it's just there was a lot of, I would say, I don't even think fear would be the best word, but there was a lot of like, yes, the best word is going back to perception. So the perception of it was that a lot of players, even when they knew they were up, they had it in the back of their mind that the Warriors is that type of team that could
Yeah.
come back and beat us at any moment, right? So I'm going to keep my foot on the gas type of situation. But if you really look at it deeper, and that's where I say the reality part of this comes out. The Celtics kind of did what the Warriors do to every other team,
Yeah.
right? They played around for not played around, but they stayed in the game. They stayed at bay for the first 3 quarters, and then they had a ballistic fourth quarter. Do I think that that's going to happen all series long? No. But at the same time, does the Celtics need to do this all series long? I don't think so. And it makes me I don't think I question my prediction of the Warriors still winning. It just makes me think that the series may be a lot longer than I thought it would be. And if the Warriors don't wise up, they could lose the series as well too.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely think it's a well needed wake up call because you phrased it kind of perfectly. Of they like to play with their fruit, and we've seen it multiple times. I don't know if I would go as far as like you're saying. Like it's not, or I definitely would agree, not the same Warriors team as it was in the past, especially in terms of like coming back and all that from like down a whole lot. I think they still really do have that potential, and it's really just like I mean, we see it even in this game of like Steph Curry, 21 in 1 quarter. How many times have we seen a player like Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, even Jordan Poole this year being able to score like 20 in 1 quarter out of nowhere? So it is very possible. Is it as likely as it was in the past? I don't think so. It's definitely going to be a lot harder against this Celtics team that it is so good defensively. Um, so that's definitely where the question is. I'm just like I said before, I'm more impressed that the Celtics are able to, or the Celtics role players, you can say, are able to really will them to this win when their star isn't doing as well. That's impressive. We have seen in multiple. We've seen the other side of the coin too for the Celtics, where kind of the role players don't have anything, and it's only Jason Tatum going off, and they lose this game. And like, there's so many times for both these teams, the Warriors and the Celtics, where there's a blowout win or a blowout loss, whatever it is. Like, I feel like we probably have a game or two of those coming in this series, but definitely I think it's going to be at least I think it's at least going to be 6 games. I'm predicting probably 7 games, just because of how I think close these teams are right now. What do
I
you think
think
there?
think it goes back to even another part of the perception over reality thing. It's like the perception is going to be that the Warriors have the two best 1-2 punch in this series because what Clay has done in the past, what
Yeah.
Steph Curry is, there's no changing what Steph Curry is. But reality is Clay's still a guy that's struggling since he's came back.
Yep.
And there's games he does turn it on, and then there's games he doesn't, right? And this was one of those games he didn't turn it on, right? And through that, it makes me, and this is another part that is interesting because I even thought about it in the Miami Heat series that they just had, is that Jalen Brown outplayed Tatum.
Yep.
Like it was, if you were watching each game, you noticed that he outplayed Tatum. It's just there's specific moments, specific games where
Yeah.
Tatum just takes it to another level. But this game should be like if I was the coach and I'm in the locker room, I'm giving the game ball to Jalen Brown because what Jalen Brown did in that third quarter
Yeah.
to right the ship and early in the fourth quarter to right the ship is what really propelled them. And then you started seeing Al Horford going crazy, hitting threes and hitting middies, and just getting them into a rhythm of like, yo, we're in this game. Like
Yeah.
we could get back into this game to a point where then, like I said, Al Horford made it. Yeah, we're gonna win this game. And that's where I think the perception reality thing is. Where reality is now is that if they're both on, if it, I think their 1-2 right now is more dangerous in the series than what Clay and Steph is going to give you because Steph is
Yeah.
going to continue giving you what he gives you. But Clay is still in a place where he's figuring everything out. And then what are you gonna do? You're gonna put Clay on the bench and then let Jordan Poole play. Jordan Poole is great offensively, but he is a defensive liability.
Yeah.
And you saw there was multiple plays where the play broke down and Jalen's just blowing by Jordan Poole, you know? So that's what makes me interested to see how the rest of the series goes. I'll be honest with you, man. If Celtics come back on Sunday and find a way to win that game, it might be the craziest thing we've ever seen because it's going to be hard for anyone to convince themselves that Warriors will come back. Obviously, like I said, because
Yeah.
they're at perception, because of what we've seen, because of what we know they've done in the past. We will still not close the door on it, but 2-0 and the two games we're at your home is not a pretty sight for any team, you know?
Yeah. Touching on the Jaylen Brown thing, he's been just so good. I definitely agree on that point of like the way I kind of feel of if I would rank the players. It definitely kind of feels like one, the best player is Steph Curry. Two,
I don't
it's
know.
kind of feels like a 2A and 2B of like Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. And like you said, like Jason Tatum has that next level, but there definitely is the inconsistencies, and Jaylen Brown is just more of like super steady. And then like I'm actually with like Klay Thompson, I guess you can put him as like that fourth guy, but like, I don't think the gap between where Klay Thompson is and honestly how Al Horford has been playing is that far. Like I really think it's that close. So that's where like this whole series, man, it is surprisingly close. Like just so competitive in my opinion. And I always think back to I remember at the beginning of the season we were giving like our predictions of how these teams are going to play out. And I was very adamant about like the Celtics, they got nothing. I was so low on the Celtics. Never have been more
Hey,
wrong.
the craziest part about it is I don't think that we were off about it because I was on the same
Yeah,
boat.
yeah.
I think that at that present moment, how they were playing, they were still playing as what we
Sure.
thought they were going to play.
Yeah.
At some point, they bought into what Ime Udoka was saying, and that's why, in my mind, I thought he should have won Coach of the Year because of, let's be honest,
True.
when have you ever seen? Because it's funny, it is a role reversal that happened in January of what it was is where you've seen a team that was in the 10th seed in early January. That's around like 40, 50 games into the season, close to that, right?
Yeah.
And I think they were 23 and 24. And then they wind up being the number two seed
Number two.
the East. Like when have you heard that happen?
Yeah.
That doesn't happen every day. And then even further, when have you heard a team that was 10th at one point in the season, past 5 games, make it
Yeah.
all the way to the finals?
Yeah.
This is where it's been an interesting season, and I say it's a role reversal because you take the other team that they wound up playing in the first round, the Nets were the 1 seed or near the either 1 or 2 at that point,
Yeah.
and then they completely collapsed, and then they wind up like switching roles at that point, and the difference between that, in my mind, like I mentioned, was coaching. And coaching ultimately still matters and
Yeah.
how teams are. Even if you have the best constructed team, it doesn't matter if you don't have the right vision or direction being taken with these players. And I remember us speaking early on in the year about when Marcus Smart made the comments about everyone knows what to expect from what the Celtics do. It's either going to be a Jalen or it's going to be Jason Tatum
Yeah.
at the end of the game taking the shots. So that's why it's so easy to defend against us. But now they're in a place where they trust their role players. Pritchard had a great game.
Yeah.
You brought up Derek Wright, Derek White, and that was the next person I wanted to speak on a little bit as well too. And those guys really showed up. Al Horford showed up. Their role players are really taking. They're not taking the backseat anymore. They're actually taking a step to showing up for these games and being present instead of just like standing and watching, because standing and watching is literally how you get to seventh seed when you're
Yeah.
supposed to be the one seed and you're as the Brooklyn Nets. You need your role players to be there, and that's where I think those two big differences have been for the Celtics over this season is role players came alive because of coaching, and then coaching is the reason why they flipped everything is because they had a great coach in what they have.
Yeah. Just to even touch on even more of the point of like great coaching, look at who everyone generally considers is probably the best coach in the NBA right now, of Eric Spoelstra of this Miami Heat team. We all kind of knew this entire time. They don't really have the talent. The talent is a lot of just really good role players. And they had a bunch of people that were like barely in the NBA, and then now are actually performing really well for the team. Like especially like Duncan Robinson and then like Struess and all these guys. But like that, it really shows how important coaching is and how that can really change your team. And then in terms of, you mentioned of turning around the season, I don't know if you saw the the press conference when Jaylen Brown was literally asked, or not Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum was asked, like, when do you think the season turned around? And he literally said like, oh, it was around in January where RJ Barrett hit that game winner against the Celtics, and the Knicks were bad at the time. He's like, that was the lowest point, and after that, that's when they like turned it up. So you're welcome, Celtics. RJ Barrett did that, and it was the luckiest thing ever. But yeah, they really just kind of like it seemed like at that point they hit a low. They weren't doing well. Something had to change. They had to buy in. And look where they are now. It's pretty impressive. Yeah, those role players, they're doing their job.
Exactly. So, speaking of role players, that leads into the last person I wanted to speak about on this series is Derek White, and I mentioned it a few weeks back when we pod. I think it was the last episode or episode
Yeah.
before that. Is he's on his Fred Van Vliet, just had a baby,
Yeah.
and it there was games where in that series, even game six that they lost to the Heat, where he just went off. He just
Yeah.
went off. In game six, he had 22 points. He got 4 of 7 from three, and he just looked good. He looked honestly
Yeah.
really good, and he was exactly what they needed in that game. Even though they eventually lost the game,
Yeah.
it was still because of him that they were in the position to almost even win it in game six. But the whole series as a whole, his points production actually went up literally after the game that he missed, because I think it was he did not make game one, right?
Yeah.
And he was in game two. He only had 3 points. Game four, he had 0 points. Then game five, six, seven, yeah, game five, six, and seven. He actually, I'm sorry, games 4, 5, and six, besides seven, he actually had double digit scoring. So he had a pretty good showing for a role player in this playoffs, and he's been pivotal for what they needed. And then in game one of the finals, he made himself even more pivotal. The dude had 21.
Yeah.
21. He was 5 of 8 from three, and he was shooting about 54% from the field in that game. So
Yeah.
the guy actually was having an amazing game one, and that was almost like in 2019. You didn't expect
Yeah.
Fred Van Vliet to be the guy that woke up and just say, you know what, I'm about to put it on my back and I'm about to carry this team. Obviously, Kawhi was there, just like in the same series. It
Yeah.
feels the same way. Even though we're just one game in, I'm not going to overreact on it. But just like in the same fashion with the Raptors, it was a well balanced attack. Even though Kawhi was the leader of it, granted Jason Tatum would be the equivalent in this moment. He didn't really show up, but he had the other guys show up, and that was amazing for them in Game One.
Yeah, I love that comparison. There definitely is something with when you have a baby like that and these guys just go to the next level. I would love to see, Derek White keep this up. If he can keep this up, I mean, I would feel pretty confident saying the Celtics would win the series if he can keep up this type of performance. Is he going to have that every game? I don't know if you can expect that from him, but just do this maybe another 2-3 times, and Celtics are looking pretty. Yeah, looking pretty. Um, do you want to move on to our next topic?
Yes, ready to move on. All right, so the NBA has progressively dropped every All NBA team. I'll go over all the names that are on the team, and then we'll discuss some of our surprises. If you have any surprises, Brian, on this list, and any busts that was on this list as well. So starting off with I think I'll start off from east to best. So starting off with the All NBA third team, leading it off at the center was Cat. Well deserved in my mind for
Yeah.
him to get it this year. A very surprising forward in LeBron James having a very amazing year 18 is on that third team as well. Chris Paul and Trey Young round up the guards. And then lastly, the other forward was Pascal Siakam of the Toronto Raptors to round up that all NBA third team. Going now into the second team is starting off with this has been a very controversial selection at this point. Was Joel Embiid of the Philadelphia 76ers at that center spot. The two guards were John Morant and Steph Curry. And then rounding up the forwards for the All NBA second team were Kevin Durant of the Brooklyn Nets and DeMar DeRozan of the Chicago Bulls. Lastly, the first team with with a unanimous 100. I mean, I said 100. I meant to say first team votes was Giannis Antetokounmpo and Jason Tatum rounding up the forwards on the first team. Then you have for the guards Luka Doncic from the Dallas Mavericks and Devin Booker of the Phoenix Suns. And then at center, Nikola Jokic. I don't know why I was going to say Djokovic, but Nikola Jokic of the Denver Nuggets to round up the first team. Brian, any surprises, any snubs? Obviously, I went over a couple controversial ones that were there. What was your thoughts on every name that was revealed?
So I actually don't think it's too crazy. I mean, what it really is crazy is just that there's so many good players in the NBA today that, like, if I really look at the first team and second team, like, a lot of these people are pretty comparable in my opinion. Of like I mean, especially with, like, if Kevin Durant was playing the entire season healthy, he should be a first team. Like Steph Curry too, like, that's kind of more surprising. But just like, who do you pick? Steph Curry, Luca, Devin Booker had an amazing year. What he did with that with Phoenix, I think he did actually. I will say, I believe Devin Booker deserves to be on first team. But in terms of like a surprise, I kind of say like Pascal Siakam, to be honest. Of if I just like read all the names, it's like what name doesn't belong here? I would probably say him. It's not like Siakam's bad at all. Siakam's a very good player, but to be third team, more surprising that you don't have like Jimmy Butler taking that spot. I think that's probably the biggest like miss on this list. And then I don't mean honestly, I don't know. Maybe you have somebody for like I can even say like maybe take Chris Paul out of third team, but still like I mean what they did with for the Phoenix Suns this year and how just dominant they were the entire time. I'm not mad at it, but I could see somebody else being there. I wouldn't. I would be fine. What do you think? Who do you have?
So there's the growing
Oh
conversations
yes.
about like whether or not it should be a positionless selection. I still believe it should be a position based selection
Yeah.
because then at that point, you're going to have the issue of going to force. There's two guys you're going to almost every year going to
Yeah.
want to force to number one. And that's going to be Katie. That's going to be Giannis, right? But you know, if you're going to force guys like that in there to the top, where do you give the space or allow the space for someone like a Jason Tatum to win it? You allow the space for someone like to have a really good season out of the ordinary and make one of these teams because a lot of these decision makings are predicated on are not predicated on, but it eventually factors into how much money you're going to
Yes.
make in the long run, right?
Exactly.
So eliminating the positions, as I understand, the game has become more positionless, but you do not, that we 80 and Giannis have the height of a
Yes.
center, but you do not regard them as centers. You do not regard
Yeah.
them as centers. You do not see them. You don't visually, the eyeball test does not show you that those two guys are centers. They're just the size of centers, you
Yes.
know? And through that, that's why I say like it makes it would make it very difficult for guys like a Joel Embiid, who is one of the people that has been made a question of controversial,
Yeah.
of how controversial these decisions have been, to be selected in the first place. People are upset that Jokic is, I mean, not Jokic, that Embiid was second in voting for MVP, yet he's on the second team. He
Yeah.
should be on the first team. But I think that that makes sense just or in the matter of keeping it fluid in that sense from letting it be positionless because I think there's a world in some cases where through the writers decision making where they could go through a first team ballot and
Yeah.
not even put one center, and that's where I feel like they need to keep the positions for that same purposes. Same reason why I felt the same way about the All Star game. Keeping positions is the same way that I feel about this.
Yep.
Where I will say where I have the issues with the All Star selections, all team selections, all NBA team selections, is that I think that there shouldn't be parameters set around which team you make it to, and your compensated is adjusted as such to that, right? I think if you make it to an All NBA team, you are qualified for the
Yeah.
Supermax. There should not be beyond. It should not be go beyond certain parameters of that nature, right?
Yeah.
Think about it. If you look at it too, you're essentially saying the top three centers in the league are at Jokic and Embiid, right? I don't think that that's wrong, but like it just goes to show what is there's not really there's a huge gap
Yes.
between the top of what the centers are and what the rest of the centers are in the league, right? So because of that, like I said, that's where I think it becomes an issue if you go positionless, because you could easily phase out centers being considered for this award. It's much like in other sports where you look at like the NFL, it's almost like an unwritten rule that MVP typically is going to go to a quarterback. No one said that it's always going to be a quarterback, but it typically goes to a quarterback.
Yeah.
So same mindset I think would happen with some of these awards, and that's why even it becomes controversial when Jokic wins his awards, because people are not seeing it in the same light because he's a center, and his gap between the talent that's in his pool and the talent that is in the guard pool and that are in the forwards pool are just a lot more vast compared to the centers pool. But I still think that there's a place for to put them in the same light as these other players because they're just as equally great. You can't blame them because the pool is bad, right? Like
Yeah.
that's not their fault.
No, I definitely agree on that point. I am part of the team of I like the system how it is now. Because when I think about it, it is similar like what you're saying of when we put an all-star team together, like the first team, those are the best five that you can pull from that season. And that's the team that you would run. I like that rather than just having it completely. I'm gonna have two centers. I'm gonna have this, maybe no guard at all. Like I like the system how it is now. Um, I don't mind the Joel Embiid going to the second team because, like Zachary said, like he's the second best center right now, and that's where he goes. I guess what the more crazy thing that when I'm looking at this at the voting that Nikola Jokic, the MVP, had 12 second team votes. Who are these 12 people that would say the MVP doesn't deserve to be on the first team? That's mind blowing.
Really, I think it clearly is the people that did not choose him
Yeah.
to be MVP that did that as well. But the craziest part about it is the disparity. It being that this, and this is where I'm saying like there
Yeah.
has to be in their mindset as these writers, they're not thinking about the positions though.
Yeah.
But
That's true.
there's the disparity in like how the voting is because you look at it, makes no sense. Jokic has 88 first team votes, and then like you mentioned, 12 second team votes. How does it make sense that Carl has zero first team votes and 38 second team votes, right? And then you
Yeah.
look at Joel Embiid, he has 57 first team votes and he has 43 second team votes. That's what I'm saying. Like it has to be
Yeah.
that they go into there not thinking about positions, but the NBA is structuring it into the positions after the fact. So even if um, even if you had numbers to be in regards, because look at it, if you
Yeah.
look at it, Joel Embiid has better numbers in the voting than Jason Tatum, but because he's not he's not
Yeah.
it's not a positionless thing, they're not going to move Joel Embiid into the first team.
Yeah.
But that's where, like I said, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. But there is people that are upset with that. And granted, if they could give a valid reason why they think that it should change, I would be up to listening to it. But I
For
think
sure.
it is. There's a lot more to it with being able to structure it off of positions. Um, you mentioned Pascal Siakam. That was the big piece on Twitter. Is I don't. There was a lot of tweets. I can't remember who tweeted this specifically, but there was one guy that said that I can't believe that Pascal Siakam made it. And it's not a discredit to his game, he was saying
Hmm.
in that sense. He just said, I think this is so interesting because I don't think there's ever been a player that did not make an all star team that made the all NBA team that same season. And I was like, that is so
Yeah.
interesting because that was true. I went and I checked it out, and he wasn't on it. It was Fred Van Vliet
Yeah.
that because I remember there was someone that was on the Raptors that made it to All Star game, and it was Fred Van Vliet. So it's interesting that he won that, but I guess that's why some people will argue against the forwards thing situation. But if I'm thinking about it, honestly, I don't even think that that's a problem with the forward with the
Yeah.
positions thing. I just don't generally believe out of the top six forwards in the league that Pascal Siakam is who I choose to put into this team. I think
Yeah.
he's a good player, but I think that there's guys of the likes of I think the biggest snub in my mind was Jimmy Butler. And if not Jimmy Butler, a person that I was just talking about earlier, Jalen Brown could have
Yep.
easily made this team as well. So both of those guys had impeccable seasons. I think it was a little bit of, oh, Raptors made a crazy run that we weren't expecting, so we had to at least get one guy in here. And that's what
Yeah.
it felt like with the All-Star game as well, too, when they got Fred Van Vliet. Because I think it would have made more sense to have I think Pascal was actually injured during that time, but
Yeah.
they put Fred Van Vliet into the All-Star game instead.
No, I definitely agree. It's I mean, yeah, it doesn't fit. It doesn't fit. There's two definitely. I would if you had Jalen Brown over Jimmy Butler, I'd be like, okay, I'm cool with that. Jimmy Butler over Jimmy Butler, okay, sure. But Pascal there doesn't make sense. And like you say, he's not a bad player, but there definitely is people that I think would go over him. This is where it always just like, who are these people that are voting right now? Who voted for Pascal there? Who didn't vote for Jimmy Butler? Like this is what's confusing. These are the questions I need answered. It doesn't make sense.
I
Do you
agree.
want to move on to our last main topic for today?
Oh, I was gonna go over
Oh,
the all defensive team as well.
oh, word. You want to do that? Actually, I didn't even look at that. I'll pull it up too.
Could quickly go over it.
Yeah, yeah.
I think that this won't be as long of a conversation as the last one. There
Okay.
wasn't as much controversial individuals on this list. I think that, you know what, honestly, I think this is the most spot on list I've seen ever in my life. So I'll go through it really quickly. For the all defensive team, we had the second team being starting off with the center role. We have Robert Williams III from the Boston Celtics. Then you have for the forwards Bam and Draymond as the two forwards, and then Drew Holiday and Matisse Thybulle round up the guards for the second team all defense. Then you have for the first team, I'm sorry. For the first team, you have the center, Rudy Gobert. Then for the two forwards, you have Giannis Antetokounmpo and Jaren Jackson Jr. And rounding it up on the guard side is the unanimous Marcus Smart and then Mikal Bridges to round up the guards. This, I will say, clearly does not go off of position
Yeah.
because take into account Bam. Bam was center, and
Yeah.
in all intents and purposes, when the Miami Heat suited up for a game, Bam was their center. So I don't know how you just change him to being a forward, and I know it's because of his size They're probably saying that because Bam I think is around 6'9", 6'10".
Yeah.
But that's where I'm like, okay, so now you're gonna shift it for certain reasons, is where it's becomes a bigger issue. And honestly, again, the points don't make sense to me. I don't understand how there's less votes. How does Bam like? I'm not great with the on the fly math, but let me. I just want to see how many votes was casted because
Yeah, what?
it just doesn't seem like an equal amount. It's not. It's Bam has three fewer votes than Jaron Jackson Jr. And Jaron Jackson Jr. has less first place votes, and
Yeah.
he has more second place votes, but he happens to be in the first team. That makes absolutely no sense to me, and makes me think like, in what case, where, how does that play
Yeah.
into this? I feel like we as fans of the game should be explain this a little bit better because it does become very confusing to try to understand this on the fly because it really some of these numbers make no sense to me. Like it just doesn't make
Yeah.
sense in how they got to those numbers.
It's
You
just
know,
some people at the end of the day looks like just didn't vote for Bam as a first or a second team, and that's where like this disparity comes from. And as you see, it's a
that
literally
could
a
be.
one. It's just a 1 point difference between the two. Of Jerry Jackson Jr. has 153 points versus Bam has 152. So that's where it kind of looks like, and I'm just even confused at the people that wouldn't even vote Bam for one or the other. That that's probably what, especially when he's in consideration for like defensive player of the year and all that. Uh, that's where the most confusion is. But yeah, like you're saying, I don't think there's anything wrong with this list. I mean, I think it's pretty good. I see the main thing people complain about for the defensive team is like Jared Allen, but then the day it's only two teams versus three, and you have like I rather defensively, I rather have Rudy Gobert over Jared Allen. And I understand why people would vote Robert Williams over Jared Allen because the Celtics were the best defense in the NBA. So that's why I don't think it's crazy. I could definitely see the argument of wanting Jared Allen over Robert Williams, but like, what do you think?
think Robert Williams was the right decision
Yeah,
to
right.
have on this team. You saw what his impact was to the Celtics and how
Yeah,
they changed as a team heading into the playoffs. So, um, I think they made all the decisions was made right.
yeah,
Going back to what you're saying, you're so right about what you said. Is that I'm not factoring in the fact that there was other individuals that could be selected.
yeah,
I think it would be better off, in my mind, is that there's a qualification that puts you
yeah,
into the labeling of who can be selected. Because then at that point, numbers disparity and what throws you off is not because some guy out of the blue that's from, let's say you said Jared Allen, someone that's from Cleveland that just like, I
yeah,
gotta give Jared Allen a vote, and now it's costing Bam a selection that could result in money for
yeah,
him. So that's where I would say, like, yes, I would rather it be a criteria of players that the NBA selected. Okay, these are the guys you can select because
yeah,
there would be an issue if, like, let's say for MVP, I think even MVP should have a criteria in that sense too. Because
yeah.
if you have that one reporter that just happens to say, you know what, I'm picking. I can't even think of it. I don't even want to disrespect someone by
Frank
just saying an
Ntilikina.
outlandish. Exactly, but I didn't want to pick an outlandish name because of that. But
Yeah,
like if someone does that, that throws it off. That throws the
it
vote
does.
off. So same manner of when earlier on in the week, or last week it was, I think it was on game 7, they mentioned that Kyrie got one third place vote for the All NBA. And Stephen A. Smith almost lost his mind because Jalen Rose said that it was him that gave the vote to Kyrie. And a dude just like screams, "What?" Like for no reason.
That's funny.
But it's true. I don't think Kyrie
Yeah.
was deserved of an All NBA team this year because he just didn't get to play
Yeah.
as much, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you know, there's things you factor into these decision making.
That's
And
a little
you know what?
disrespectful.
You know what? I can say if there is one thing that we can mention to be a reason why Robert Williams, I mean Jared Allen could have been looked at a little bit more than Robert Williams, is that I think Robert Williams, and I don't know for 100% fact, may have played less games than Jared Allen this season. And if that's a factor, then you can factor that in too. And that's where I say, like, if a qualification or a criteria is needed to be made to make this a little bit more easier for to make the right people be selected, I would be 100% down for that.
Yeah. Trying to pull up exactly how many games they each played. From what I saw real quick, Robert Williams, 61 games he played. And Jared Allen, actually, 56. Yeah, less games.
Ooh, so they made the right decision.
Yeah, there you
You know what?
go.
They made the right decision.
Not too shabby. Um, yeah, I'm happy we went over the defensive teams because I didn't give it much thought before now. Do you want to move on to now our last main topic before the weekly
Yes,
roundup?
sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So first, speak on this. I think we had to take the whole thing into account, the whole season into account for this individual. You know, much like any season, and I'll be honest. I've always been a big proponent against this guy being considered a superstar.
Mm-hmm.
Even in the 2020 season when he led Miami Heat to the finals against the Lakers. Um, I'm not trying to bastardize what the 2020 NBA Finals was, being that it was in the bubble, but I always felt there was a decrease in intensity of the games
Right.
because it was being held in a vacuum sealed situation environment, right? So because of that, you don't get the emotions, you don't get the
Yep.
same rush that game 7 at home would give you,
It's
right?
different.
So yeah. So because of that, I still had the belief that Jimmy Butler was just not a superstar in my mind at this point. Um, this season, I wouldn't say was an amazing season, but it was a good season. He was shooting close to 22%. I mean, he was shooting close to 22 points per game, around 6 rebounds per game, and a little bit above 5 assists a game. And then he was shooting around 48% from the field, but was shooting a horrendous 23% from from the 3 point line. Jimmy Butler completely, utterly flipped the switch in the playoffs. Man was shooting nearly 28 points per game, had a little bit above 7 rebounds per game, close to 5 assists per game, 2 steals per game, was shooting 50% from the field. And now it may not sound that big, but to jump 10% and your 3-point percentage in the playoffs is a leap. 33%
Oh yeah.
is a big jump, and to being someone you can expect to hit a shot
Hmm.
when you need it, rather than someone that if you give him this shot, he's probably not going to make it. Is
Yeah.
that 10%? You know, so that was already cause for pause for who he was and what my thinking could change about Jimmy Butler. But what made it even further, in my mind, the belief that this guy is now a superstar is that the Eastern Conference Finals that they had was just he was prolific. The points in general on the average is not as great as his whole playoffs, but there was just performances in there that Miami needed for them to even to be in consideration to win this series, right? He started off the series in game one with a 41-point game, turned that around to 29 in a loss in the second game. Um, games 3 and 4, he was dealing with injuries, so he had 6 and 8. That wasn't as great performances. Game 5 wasn't an amazing performance either. He only had 13. But game 6 and 7, this is the moments when you need a player to step up. You need someone on your team to show that I'm the guy that's going to help us propel to where we need to be. He, in a game that, an elimination game, he was able to put up 47 points, shoot 4 of 8 from three. He was able to shoot 55% from the field off of 29 shots. And then game 7 ultimately ended on a loss, but also another stellar game where he shot 35 points in that game and he was shooting 54% from the field. It honestly made me change my mindset on who he is as a player. And I regard him as one of the superstars in the league now because of that. What do you think, Brian?
So so I don't completely disagree. I mean, so one, Jimmy Butler put on some insane performances. Like he really has. And we do see this in his career of just when he plays in the playoffs versus his regular season games, it's a different Jimmy Butler. Um, we've seen it with the Sixers and we've just seen it throughout his entire career. I guess where I kind of think about it, and it's kind of weird, like it's such a like a feeling kind of thing of like, oh, who's a star, who's a superstar, just because it's like, I mean, it's just it's opinion. And so when I think about it, Jimmy Butler's probably like at the high, in my opinion, of like the highest ceiling of where like the star is before they become like a superstar. And every once in a while, he can like knock on that door and go into like superstar territory. But it's just, I think, I mean, there's levels to it. It's hard to say, but there's levels to it because you think about it, you see like Steph Curry, not necessarily same level as Jimmy Butler. As like, I mean, I'm saying Jimmy Butler is not on the same level as like Steph Curry and like some of those other guys. Jimmy Butler every once in a while can go to that level. We've seen it, and it's generally like if you look at Jimmy Butler, he just is one of the most competitive people you probably ever see. You hear about his insane work ethic. You hear all the time about how he fights with his teammates during practices because he is just that competitive. So it's not surprising to me at all when there's seasons on the line. This guy is your guy to go to, and he's gonna put on that performance. And that's exactly what we see. It's phenomenal. The guy is an amazing player. I don't know if I'm at that point, but I guess I guess I could be swayed. Like it's just such a weird. Like he has that superstar impact at times, but I guess in my opinion, there needs to be a little more level of consistency there. But yeah, that's kind of like where my mind at. It's weird. It's really weird.
My question to that then is, why do we not hold someone like a Jason Tatum to that same pedestal?
And that's where I guess even now, like I'm kind of thinking back on that of he's really close. Like, because I remember last time we talked about this, we are like Jason Tatum after all those performances he's had, superstar. Now after seeing him being like a lot more inconsistent, I'm kind of releasing my foot off that gas pedal a bit. I don't know if I'm completely committed to saying that he is just a star and not a superstar, but I think I also come back to it of there's like the age difference. What I think Jimmy Butler's 32, what Jason Tatum's like 25, and this is not his. This is like a prime versus not a prime, and like I'm comfortable saying Jason Tatum 3 years later is gonna be 100% like that guy. Jimmy Butler 3 years later, not really. So that's where I'm a little more hesitant.
Okay. So my thing is, and I saw a picture recently. Was Nick Wright, where he had like an artist draw up all of the players that were superstars and players that wasn't superstars, and he had Jimmy Butler as one of the players that was like outside the club, like waiting to get in, and it's just so for me. I think that it always feels like we're fighting the thought of putting him in that
Yeah.
conversation. I don't think that he necessarily shouldn't be a superstar, but it makes me ask the question now: who do you think is not in that conversation anymore, too? And what? And because of that, why do you not think that Jimmy Butler can't be one of those players now? Because of that.
Um. Well, yeah. I mean, I guess to be honest, I probably have to do some more thinking about it because I do kind of think there might be like similar to a club. There's a capacity limit, and if you think about it, like someone that I would probably put down to a star level that was a superstar is Chris Paul, in my opinion. I would definitely say if you told me a couple years ago, like Chris Paul, superstar, that guy is next level. Even last season, he was pretty next level. Aside from when he was injured and all that stuff. Um, but I like that's where right now I'm like, I don't know. Jimmy Butler, Jason Tatum, it's like a this kind of thing. Like there isn't that much of a gap and like I don't know, but that's where it is. Like can I be swayed? Sure. But gut instinct of just like cuz you can see it when you watch these one guy versus another guy. They look different. It feels different. Jimmy Butler did look like that in those 2 games. I will say in those 2 games he looked like that superstar level, but it's not. I guess I need a little more consistency there.
I think what's also messing up the conversation as well is that we factor in one-on-one, one-on-one,
Yeah.
com like competitions into these decision making, and we spoke about it how last year, one on if you brought up the series with the Nets and the Bucks, a lot of people started to say, oh well, Giannis is now number one because he beat KD and he won the championship on that route. But you're not crazy enough to say, like, there is people that were crazy enough to say
Yeah.
it, but you should not. If you're an avid basketball watcher, you should not be crazy enough to say that Jason Tatum has already surpassed KD
Of
because
course.
then it means that you're just watching. You're watching the highlights.
Yeah,
You don't
it's
watch
different.
the games, and you're being swayed by narratives. Because a lot of the reasons why KD wasn't KD in that series was because the Celtics' physicality did not allow for KD, a guy that's
Yeah.
predicated on finesse, a lot more finesse than physicality, to play his game. You had switches. You had a lot of switches with big men that can actually stay with KD. You had a lot of box and ones. You had a lot of double teams coming at KD. So like it wasn't like KD just was not going to be given the opportunity to be the Kevin Durant that he was when we saw him in that Bucks series. They were not going to give him that choice, and they knew that the Nets role players did not afford him the opportunity to be given that choice. As soon as you gave it to the Nets role players to make that decision, or to be the ones that aided in that, even Kyrie. Kyrie, honestly, Kyrie came up for one game, showed up for one game in the
Yep.
series, and then after that, he was pretty abysmal. So, they knew that it was over in that sense. But now linking it to the same thing is, are we gonna start saying that Tatum is better just because he beat Giannis in the second round? No,
Yeah.
I don't think that one-on-one
Yeah.
uh performances should be factored into it, because you're discounting that it's a whole team, and that's
Yep.
the reason why one player may look better than the other, because their team is handling them. And let's be honest, if we look at most of these other teams with superstars, they're not asked to guard the superstar
Mhm.
that's on the other team. In the Nets case, um, they have to ask KD to guard the best player on the other team, because they just don't have the size
Yeah.
for it. Neither do they have the defender for it to guard these type of guys, right? Yeah, you could have a couple guys switch on to Giannis for a little bit, but that's KD's job, because there's just no one on the Nets that could even get close to slowing down Giannis for a while. So that's where, for me, like I said, I can't factor in one-on-one into it, and that's why for me, I think largely of why I'm moving him up, or I'm moving Jimmy Butler into the conversation, is the heart factor into it. I think
Yeah.
that to truly to break into being the superstar isn't about the stats you have.
Yep.
It truly comes down to how much will, how much power do you have to make your team that may not be as good as they look a lot better. And if you take Jimmy Butler off this team, does this team make the playoffs? Like, they may make the playoffs.
Like playing
That's a
in.
maybe. Yeah. but do they win a first round matchup? No.
Nah.
So that's where I say, like, superstar status lifts you up past some of those things. Granted, that just shows you how bad it was for certain superstars.
Yeah.
For like the likes of, once again, bringing up the Nets. If KD's not there, the Nets are dumpster fire. They did go out a dumpster fire, but it would have been a worse dumpster fire than they were at the end of the season. They
Yeah.
made it at least to the first round of the playoffs, right? And that was strictly because they had the star power to be in that conversation, right?
Yeah.
But that's where I say to myself, why I have the questions, why I think about Jason Tatum's not there yet, is if I could pluck out Jason Tatum, and especially game one showed that, if I could pluck out
Hmm.
Jason Tatum and I could put someone that's not the same level as Jason Tatum, but a couple notches down, and put him on that team, do I think the Celtics would still be a good team? Do I still think that there's a chance they
Yes.
could have done the same things and made it to the finals? I think, yeah, I think they could. And that's where I say, like, how I factor in who is a superstar in my mind.
Yeah. I mean, I even kind of think about like, I like, I don't know. I think I kind of like Jason Tatum on the Heat better than Jimmy Butler, and like you were saying, vice versa too. Um, yeah, I mean that's the thing. I could definitely see, depending on which side of the bed I wake up, like I can feel Jimmy Butler is over Jason Tatum and Jason Tatum's over Jimmy Butler. I think it's just that close. Um, but that's where like I was saying, I just kind of, my bias kind of goes towards the younger guy versus the older guy. Um, but I guess we'll see. I'm actually curious if like any of the listeners let us know. I'm really curious of what other people think as well, if they were thinking the same level, or you just put both of them in the superstar conversation. That's an option too. We can see.
I have one last question on that,
Yeah, yeah,
and not Jimmy Butler, but how does injury factor into who you consider superstar? Because I know Nick Wright, like I mentioned,
yeah.
kicked out one player because of injuries and the inconsistency of being on the court, and that player was Anthony Davis.
Um, Does it factor? I would say yes. With Anthony Davis, like I'm fine in kicking him out as of now too. I would say, just because if like the guy's not really playing, when he has played, not looking great, playing injured and all that stuff. Like, but that's where it's like I guess it could be like a revolving door. Like, hey, you get healthy, you produce, you look like you did before, come back in. But until until you can prove that you can stay like you can stay healthy like that, then you could stay outside and watch the club from from the line.
I
How do you
like
feel
that.
about
I
it?
like that.
How do you feel about that?
Uh, I think that if you've displayed if you displayed superstar ability, you deserve to still be there even through injury, right?
Okay.
But if you come back, like you mentioned, and you noticeably have regressed, you just cannot have the same moniker. You can't be
Yeah.
thought of the same. Like if because the game, the way how people will play you is different. You know, and if you see that the way how people could play certain player is different, I think that yeah, as a superstar and you were a superstar and that changed, that means you're not a superstar anymore, man.
Yeah.
Like it really does. I remember watching something where Vince Carter spoke about how he had to transition his mind from understanding he's not going to be the guy that's getting the ball
Yeah.
in crunch time anymore, or being the guy that's expected to propel us in a game anymore. And that's a psyche thing, though. And a
Yeah.
lot of people don't like to think about that, but it is a big psyche thing
It
for
is.
you to change into that type of player, you know? And kudos to any player that knows how to or was able to effectively make that change. Carmelo is now coming into that
Yep.
place. I pray that Westbrook figures that out as well because he's just not a. It's no
Yeah.
disrespect to him, but he's just not a superstar anymore. You know.
Yeah, I agree, and especially too, like you're mentioning with the injury stuff, I think everyone would agree that when Kevin Durant went out with his injury and he was out for like the entire year and everything, I think everyone would still say he was a superstar. Is he going to come back a superstar? We don't know, but like the likelihood is still there, and if not, then you still be a star, and the guy is just that good. Um, but yeah, I don't think anyone is like pushing him out just because. It's just more like when you come back, hey, how do you look? That's the
Yeah.
thing. Are you ready for weekly roundup?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Okay. So if so one we hit there's a bunch of little stuff. I kind of want to get your opinion, but rapid fire. Quinn Snyder. There's a report from Woj that Quinn Snyder is unclear about how he if he wants to return back to Utah and be the head coach there. There's the front office really wants him and they're trying to convince him. What do you feel about that situation? Should Quinn Snyder leave?
I think if you're already having the conversation internally as a coach, you should be prepared to leave at that point. And it's no disrespect to the Jazz. It's just like something that is making him feel that he has to leave, right? So I think it's important that you just at that point decide I'm ready for the next chapter in my life. You know, because what's what good is it going into the season with all of that animosity that
Yeah.
you're already feeling in the off season, right? There's a lot of, I think the team is just ready for a refresh. Is the best way to put it. It doesn't mean that they have to get rid of everyone, but some things have to change. And even when they made the first seed a few years back, we all knew or had a feeling that this was not a championship team.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry to say it like that or feel that way about it, but they should understand that as well, and they shouldn't. I mean, like they would never say that they're not a championship team. I mean, like they should understand that, like temper the expectations and understand that this is okay where we're at right now. We just got to change a few things.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you might have, I mean, you got to change up the formula. You can keep some of the same players there, especially like they're probably going to keep Donovan Mitchell and all that, maybe, but move a couple of things around and see how that works. Um, I wanted to get your thoughts. The Lakers hired Darvin Ham. There was a bunch of talk about maybe Kenny Atkinson, Mark Jackson, all these other guys that have had head coaching experience like that and have done it before. What do you think about the hire of Darvin Ham for the Lakers?
I think Darvin Ham is actually the right guy for the Lakers in my mind. A lot of people are actually not as happy about it, but I think he is the right guy for this specific job. Um, I always like to see a guy that's been quietly and humbly waiting his turn
Yeah.
and, been hungry for this opportunity. I think there's been a few other times where he's tried to get
Head coaching done.
his first crack, yeah, as a head coach. But the guy, if anyone knows about his career, obviously his career wasn't most talked about career, right? But knowing him from what he was when he was a player, you could already see that he was kind of like a coach on the bench. I remember like because I am one. I like to say I'm an NBA historian, and when I would see like some of the back in the day, like the '04 Pistons finals, he was on that team. You could see, I think he was injured during that finals run as well. You could see he was already one of those guys that, you know, was leaning into what would becoming a coach, right?
Yeah.
So, I think that he's hungry. He's ready. He wants to take a shot at this. He's deserving of it. He has a little familiarity with the team as well. He was an assistant coach with them back under Byron Scott, I believe it was. Either it was Byron Scott or it was Mike Brown during that time. And then he was with the Hawks and eventually the Bucks when they won the championship. So the guy's been around teams when they've been bad, when they've been good, and he's now put in a situation where he's right in the middle. Hopefully, being that he just came off of this successful run, and let's be honest, he's been with Mike Budenholzer for a little while. Thinking about it now too, is being that he was with the Hawks, so he's been around successful teams. That's been around superstars. He's been around successful teams that was a collective team. So like through that, I think he could garnish the right type of playing style for players that need to be game plan, the role players, and then he also knows how to manage the personalities, the egos with the superstars based off of the time that he spent with a team in the Bucks. So I think it is good hire. It's a good hire. It's a guy that's familiar with the team too. So like everything that could have checked the box for a hire has been done. I think yes, there might have been other candidates that would have been better, but he's a good hire in my mind.
I think that was very well said. I'll move on next to, I guess, kind of backing up a little bit, back to Utah. So there was a report from Jake Fisher from Bleacher Report that the Heat could offer a package for Donovan Mitchell. And the package would look something like Tyler Hero and several first round picks. Jeff, if you're Utah, would you take something like that?
No, first, a second. I don't understand the pairing of Jimmy Butler and
Donovan
Donovan
Mitchell.
Mitchell. What does that? I don't like that pairing. Is what I'll say. It's just a very funky pairing because like when I think about it, they kind of are the same player to me. Like
Yeah.
it's you know what? It's almost the same feel that I had about the Bulls when they paired DeMar DeRozan and
Yeah.
they paired um,
Lonzo, Zach Levine.
Zach Levine together. So those two guys, Lonzo's different. Lonzo's a whole different
Yeah.
place. But those two guys, same thing. It feels redundant when you have those two players. Granted, they went off to a great start in the beginning of the season, but as soon as when the time that it mattered, and we knew that it would be the time that it mattered, we would look at them the most, the playoffs. It doesn't make sense. It really does not make sense. There's, it just wouldn't, it wouldn't feel right. It wouldn't fit right. I think it's okay where it is. And honestly, man, if Tyler Hero and I heard that, man, I would be so mad. To move from Miami to Utah is probably the worst thing. I'm sorry to people in Utah, but come on, man. Like that's oh man, I don't know what type of Tyler Hero you would have got if you made that trade at that
Yeah.
point. Yeah.
Yeah. No, Tyler Hero would be down bad. Have you seen all the drama on Twitter already? Tyler Hero.
Yeah, man. I
Real-
had some conversations before this
a word.
about that. Oh, you know what? Ironically, you know what? I'm gonna put this in the pod. I saw him the other day too after Game 7, and that was a very interesting moment. You know,
A word.
very interesting moment.
All right.
But
Yeah.
yeah, but it was I just think that he's perfect here, bro. He's
Yeah.
perfect in Miami.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong. We don't have to go into his personal life. But next. Next. I know you actually always hate this guy for reporting on net stuff, and I'm actually just
Oh,
I don't believe it,
exactly.
but yeah, it's Ian Begley. I'm actually just interested to get your take that he reported that the Nets are open to trading, are signing trading Kyrie Irving. What do you think about that?
Who would they sign and trade for? Like that's the question. Like that's where it's always like, where are you getting this information from? Because like that does not answer anything. The Nets are
Yeah.
open to signing and trading for Kyrie. What does that mean? Like you're not giving me a team to consider. Like I can't think of a team that takes Kyrie for a max right now
Yeah.
and gives up something.
Would you give Kyrie the max right now?
I don't know. I still think you give it to him because of the talent.
Yeah.
Obviously you have your reservations because of everything else. But you know what's funny is that people are acting like Kyrie's first contract didn't have incentives built into it. Like that was kind of the reason they were able to bring in DeAndre Jordan. Just throw more incentives on there. Like if you don't do this, you're not capable of getting this
Yeah.
money. Like there's ways around it, like for them to be able to do that. And that's exactly what I would do after having a good understanding from Kyrie of what he's going to be able to give me.
Yeah.
Because right now, I don't know. I don't know what you're gonna get from Kyrie from year to year. The dude still technically has not passed his prime. So
Yeah.
he just turned 30, or it was even weird, like a couple months ago, finding out that Kyrie was 29. So it feels the way how we've talked about him for
Yeah.
the last couple of years is it's just like, I couldn't see him leaving, wanting to leave, but at the same time, it's also the fact that we talk about him so much has aged him, and I could see a
Yeah.
world where the guy just wants to leave the game of basketball too.
Well, he's been in the spotlight for since he came into the league, and so especially
Exactly.
playing under LeBron, like we've been talking about Kyrie Irving or playing with LeBron. Uh, we've just been hearing about Kyrie for so long.
See how
Um,
funny that was? You
yeah,
said under him, and that
I
was
know. I
because
did.
of perception. That's because of the perception. It's like, and that's where like I've always been a person that said I have no problem with how Kyrie feels about this because there was
Yeah,
just outlandish things that was asked of Kyrie. Like there was a moment I remember watching a video where a person was like, on this Father's Day, how do you feel about LeBron being like a father figure to you? I was like, what? Like that's his teammate. Then there was another one I saw recently where it was like, it was during the season. Kyrie didn't have any assists, and LeBron said like he has to do better or we have to do better, right? And then this reporter brings that up while Kyrie is sitting right by LeBron James and expecting LeBron to just rip him right there. And
yeah,
like LeBron's like, no, Kyrie could have had like 50 assists and if we still lost by 2 points, it wouldn't have mattered. So like
yeah,
we just gotta go back on the drawing board and figure out how we're gonna win this game. You know? Like to expect like the fact for
yeah,
them to expect LeBron to throw him under the bus sitting right by him is just
yeah.
hilarious. You know?
Hey, they're trying to set up a trap for him, hoping he falls into that trap, so they have a nice article to write. Uh,
Exactly.
so two more little topics, but all right, two more little news, but so there's a report from Jake Fisher, a bunch of stuff. It was actually a bunch of stuff about the Knicks, and so it was a bunch of like, if the Knicks don't trade up for a guard or don't do any stuff like that, or miss out on Jalen Brunson, they will be expected to trade for D'Angelo Russell, especially being a Nets fan and having D'Angelo Russell and everything. Now, what do you think about that?
He's a good fit for the Knicks because the Knicks still at this point need to find. He's not even a traditional point guard, so. But I do think that he adds a couple of some punch. I think you just don't trade something very meaningful. If you could get away with trading someone like Cam Reddish in that case, I don't know. Cam Reddish, I still want. I'm still high on him. I still
Yeah,
would want to give him a shot, but it goes back to the questions of like, does this become redundant again?
yeah,
But with him and RJ, when I say that, but at the same time, I think it would be a good move. I just don't. I don't think it's not the move that moves you from being a fringe playoff team to now
yeah,
being contenders. But it definitely gets you in the right direction.
yeah. It's
You're not giving up solid picks or stuff like that.
I mean, I feel like D'Angelo Russell, his value's not the greatest in the moment. He hasn't been performing the greatest. I think it'd definitely be more than just like Cam Reddish, because I feel like Cam Reddish also his value isn't great, but like that's where it's always interesting. I don't expect a whole lot there, but we'll see. And then lastly, I wanted to get your take. We touched a little bit offline about the Knicks signing Jalen Brunson's dad as an assistant coach. And we talked about it. You mentioned a little bit of conflict of interest and everything. I still don't buy like Jalen Brunson coming to the Knicks or anything like that. But I think this, or let me get your first initial thoughts of
And no,
what this potential move could be.
you hit it on the nail. It's a conflict of interest to have hired someone's dad, but it's not a problem though,
Yeah,
because you have guys like Doc Rivers that's been a coach of his son in the NBA,
yeah,
right? So there shouldn't be an issue with it. It's just truly, I think it's more of a conflict of interest in the interest of the Knicks than it is of the NBA's best interests, right?
yeah,
Because NBA could care less in my mind. I think they really could care less. I think that now having him there, just now the decision makers that are in the room that are against it are gonna feel a little. It's like whoever made the decision to hire him was looking for a confirmation bias, right? And by using his dad was like the perfect way to get that. That's what it feels like.
yeah.
You know?
It definitely, because we talked about like, oh, is it tampering? Is it not? They definitely understand like what they're doing, and it's the biggest thing that people bring up is, oh, he actually Rick Brunson was an assistant coach for Tom Thibodeau and other teams and all that stuff. So like, it's not that outlandish. It definitely does feel like it's a extra push and try to be like an extra incentive to try to get Jalen Brunson to come to the team and be like, this team is terrible. We're going to be terrible for the next 4 years, but you'll be the leader here and just take our money. And like, that's that. And that's even though, because they understand like the Mavs can still give him the most, Jalen Brunson the most money. I just find it funny that it really seems like this is probably their biggest push, and that's what their decision is going to be. And this just kind of like doubles down that like that's what they want to do. Are they gonna they're gonna swing and miss out? Most likely, but we'll see. And that's what I got for the weekly roundup. Jeff, do you have anything you want to say before we end the episode?
I think we hit everything. It was a very fulfilling episode to have had.
Yeah.
Got a lot of things off my chest. Was able to talk about the Superstars Club,
Yeah.
Superstars Club. So I'm happy with where we're at.
The Superstars Club is always an interesting one. I do really want to hear from the listeners. Please let us know. Would you have Jimmy Butler in there? Would you have Jason Tatum in there? I definitely feel like these are a little bit controversial of like, everyone kind of has their own opinion. So I would love to hear. But yeah, man, it's a fun one. It's good to be back. It's good that my back is good. And like, I'm excited to see the rest of these playoffs and really competitive games. Next time we talk, how many games are there going to be? Like another 2 or 3? Open? We'll see.
Oh, I thought you were
I'm
saying.
saying no, the playoffs.
I thought you meant like right now how many games are left. I was
No.
we got the potential of 6.
No. No, I mean by the next time, because the series is, I don't think it's gonna end.
Yeah, the series is not ending until June 19th at worst.
Wow.
At the most, I mean.
Yeah, that's crazy. So we'll have actually. So if we record next Sunday, we'll have another 3 games of sample sizes to talk about, because they play Sunday, they play Wednesday, and they play Friday. Not exciting for the listeners to hear. Really, really enjoy. Are thankful that we have people listening. Follow Jeff on Twitter, like always. Man's killing it out there. I see what you're doing out there. I'm very impressed. Well, this was. Yeah, you're having some good conversations on the Twitter. Definitely follow the pod. It's on the screen. It's in the description. Follow everything. But yeah, this is another good one. This was episode 31.
Peace.